Good afternoon. Ever since the COVID-19 pandemic imposed on us a virtual existence, conference attendees and organizers have been living out an experiment that will change how we scientists gather in the future. But online conferences democratizes access in developing countries like Sri Lanka and kindles social interactions among participants scattered across continents and time zones. As we near the final few hours of this year's ICTer conference, I warmly welcome you to the final keynote. Before I introduce the keynote speaker, the conference organizers have a small request for the participants. There will be a Google form on the meeting chat to collect feedback on the ICTer conference 2020. And it would be much appreciated if the participants could fill the form and provide feedback. Moving on, the keynote 4 will be delivered by Professor Aniruddha Joshi. He is a professor in the Interaction Design stream in the Industrial Design Center of the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Professor Joshi works in the field of human-computer interaction design. He is involved in designing interactive products for emergent users in developing economies. He has worked in diverse domains, including healthcare, literacy, Indian language text input, banking, education, and industrial equipment. He has been the co-general chair of several conferences, including Interact 2017 and India HCI 2004, 2010, 2013, and 2016. Since 2007, he has represented India on International Federation for Information Processing Technical Committee on human-computer interaction. Since 2013, he has been the director of HCI Professionals Association of India. He got the IFIP Outstanding Service Award in 2015 and the IFIP TC13 Pioneer Award in 2019. He has worked on the ACM Special Interest Group on Computer-Human Interaction, Asian Development Committee. He is currently the Vice President, Finance on the ACM SIG-CHI Executive Committee, a member of the India HCI Steering Committee, and the chair of the Interact Steering Committee. His keynote is titled, Designing Technology for Adoption by Emergent Users. Professor Joshi, I invite you to deliver the keynote address.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you very much for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for inviting me to give this talk. I would have loved to come to Sri Lanka, but I can't. It's a beautiful place. I can see only in the pictures though, but maybe next time. So yeah, the pandemic has thrown all gears out. However, it has given us one advantage. First of all, we can participate in conferences without traveling, and so it makes it easier. But today, I realized that there is a second advantage, that you can actually participate in two conferences at the same time. So I am participating, in fact, today, this morning. So the India HCI conference that you mentioned actually is starting from tomorrow. The main conference is starting from tomorrow, but yesterday and today we had pre-conference workshops and courses. And in fact, this morning I delivered a course in India HCI, and here now I am in Sri Lanka. So thank you very much for having me here. Let me just see if I can get my screen sharing going. Yeah, you should see a blank screen now, right? Do you see a blank screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to talk about designing technology for adoption by emergent users, and we have to wind up at 3 o'clock, right?
Yes.
Okay, so just tell me 5 minutes before, okay? I get carried away and talk too much. Okay, so I have some stuff to show, and I would love to show as much as possible, but I don't have to go through everything. I would love to have at least 5 to 10 minutes at the end of this talk for question and answer. So I don't want to miss that out. And in case we do have internet difficulty, I will, of course, try to log in as soon as possible. I do have multiple networks here, and it might take a minute or two to switch from one to the other. If I start facing difficulty in one place, I'll switch to the other one. Okay, so let me first take you on a trip from Sri Lanka to Mumbai, where I am located right now. So if you actually zoom in onto Mumbai and come close enough, you will realize that Mumbai is an island where there is a small body of water that separates us from the rest of the mainland. And then if you kind of zoom in a little bit more, you realize that Mumbai is actually this very large city, is shaped like a V. Okay, and then between the two arms of the V, there is this huge green patch, the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, and at the bottom of that national park are two huge lakes, and between those two lakes is the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, our university which is set up. Okay, so that's where I am right now. And this is a map designed by one of my colleagues, Professor Mandar Rane, so it looks actually nicer than Google Maps. Yeah, and this is the picture of our building. And I'll just kind of give you a quick idea about what I mean by being in a design school. So we design products. So this is a product designed in 1979 by one of my teachers, in fact, Professor Mohan Bhandari. We also design environment. So this, the environment of this petrol station was designed by my colleague, Professor Ravi Pugaya. He actually is my teacher also, and now my colleague. The post box of India Post is designed by my colleague, Professor B.K. Chakravarti. The rupee symbol was designed by our first PhD student, Uday Kumar. Professor Mandar Rane designs, he's the guy who designed the maps, the map of our campus. He also designs our metro network maps. And we have a very strong animation program. So this is a feature-length film produced by one of our professors, Shilpa Ranade. We have a strong typography discipline, and so we design typefaces for several of our Indian languages. This is a typeface that has several weights, extra thin to extra bold. It's designed by my colleague, Professor Girish Dalvi. And it is actually one of the most popular typefaces in Devanagari right now. As I said, we have a very strong animation program, and a few years ago, Professor Meena Sabnani won the Rajat Kamal Award for the best animation film from India. So this is a screenshot from that film called Hum Chitra Banate Hain. So it's a very interesting. It's a animation film based on tribal art, so it looks very different from other kind of animation films you might have seen. And we actually, several of our colleagues actually came together and put together a beautiful exhibition that is now been inaugurated. So these were the statues that were actually produced, in fact, in our university campus, and now have been installed at this Dandi Museum. So this is a museum that represents the Salt March. I don't know if you have heard of it, probably. You might have heard of it. It was a very famous movement during the independence struggle of India. And so this museum is kind of in memory of that march. And it was in fact inaugurated by our Prime Minister a few years ago, last year. Okay, so that's sort of a quick overview of where I come from and what I'm trying to show. I myself work in the area of interaction design and designing interactive technologies. And my special focus here is on emergent users, and I'll explain what I mean by emergent users first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first put together two images or two concepts in front of you, and then in the second part of my talk, I'm going to use those two concepts to show some example work from our lab. So that's my basic plan here today. Okay, but I have many examples and I don't have to show them all. But if you have any questions, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'll be happy to take questions and talk to people. Okay, so just to give you a quick overview. So about 11 years ago, a little more than 11 years ago, there were about 1.7 billion internet users. Okay, so about a year ago, there were 4.4 billion internet users. So in the last 10, 12 years, we have seen 518 new users per minute. So I've been speaking for about 5 minutes now. And in the last 5 minutes, about 2,500 people have started using the internet for the first time in their life. Okay. So that is the rate at which the internet is going. About 518 new users per minute has been the rate. And it has continued unabated for several years, for last 25 years or so. And it will continue for another few years. There are about 7.7 billion people in the world, and we kind of have gotten about maybe a third of the way through. So our interest, the interest in our lab is in the second half of this world, which is just starting to take up the internet and other technologies. The internet is an example of the kind of technologies that might be. I'm going to focus on India because that is where most of my work has been. So I'm going to kind of first lay in front of you a screenshot of India. So this is data about India from the census of 2011. So this is actually 9 years old. The next census is due next year. Hopefully, the pandemic will be over and we will be able to conduct our census. Where all these numbers will get updated. These numbers are kind of fairly out of date now. Okay, but so from in 2011, then about 67% households had electricity in India. And already by 2011, 64% households had a mobile phone or a landline. 62% households had kitchen, 58% households had bank accounts. We believe now that our bank account penetration has gone up to 95%. Our mobile phone penetration also has gone up to around 90%. About 57% households had bathrooms, 47% households had TVs, 46% had toilets, 45% had bicycles, 44% had tap water, and only 22% households had a two-wheeler and only 5% had a car. And about 18% households, if you look at it from the other side, had none of the above. They did not have any of these amenities in their house. Okay, so that was the situation back in 2011, and a lot has changed since then. Okay, but that's the context of developing countries, and with some differences. Roughly, it is the same situation in many developing countries. Okay, but I'll give you a slightly different picture, and this is the picture that I wanted to show you. So this line shows the population of India in millions. So we are currently about 135 million into 2020. So here is 2020. We are about 135 million population, and our population growth is expected to slow down now over the next 5 to 10 years. We're supposed to flatten out and then actually reduce after 2050. Okay, so that's sort of the population. The red line that I'm showing you now shows the number of mobile phone users or active SIM cards in India. And if you see, it has been rapidly rising and continues to rise with some dips and corrections from time to time. This dotted line at the bottom shows the number of landlines. So they peaked around 2005 and they've consistently been going down since then. This green line shows the number of estimated internet users according to the Internet World Statistics. This dotted brown line shows the number of smartphones sold in India. This is according to the International Data Corporation. And from the same data, I have extrapolated how many phones are less than 4-year-old, because most smartphones start dying out after 4 years. So how many phones of these are actually less than 4-year-old? And that is the second line that shows. That is roughly going along with the number of internet users. So you couldn't have a smartphone and not be an internet user, right? And the number of smartphones sold otherwise is going about. So maybe between 4 to 4.5 years is how long a smartphone lasts in the country. Okay, so that's sort of that. But now I'm going to superimpose this data with some data about users. So this line here shows how many graduates we have. Okay, so in 2011 we had about 6.5% population was graduate. Today we are about 9 or 10 or 12% at the most. We don't know what the current status is. We will know, as I said, after 2021 census. But my estimate is not more than 10% of the population might be graduate at this time, maybe 12% at the most. We also have another level of education which is called HSC or diploma, which represents 12 years of schooling. So graduate in India typically represents about 15 years of schooling, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, all graduates. Okay? 12 years of schooling is another 8 or 20%. Metric or 10 years of schooling in 2011 was 10%, 2001 was 9%. Now it is probably another 10%. So that population adds up. That is probably a representation of the middle school, a line of middle school. That is primary school. And that is our literacy line. Okay, so it is estimated that currently we have about 22% population which is not literate. Okay, adult population which is not literate. So that's sort of another picture on top of this. And now if you look at how mobile phones have gone through all these levels of education in the society, then that is actually an amazing rate of penetration. And internet seems to be doing the same. Okay. We also sort of look at this group into four. We divide this population roughly into four groups for the purpose of convenience. So anybody who has 10 years of schooling and more, okay, I would call them as educated group. And actually, we don't really do much work for them. We do some, but that is not something that I'm going to highlight in this talk. Okay, our first group that we really bother about much is this what we call the non-English literate population. So that's typically about middle school educated. So in India, in many schools, they start teaching English from year one, but in many other schools, they start teaching English from about the end of primary school, from year 5 or 6, 4 or 5. Okay, so if you kind of drop out of school around middle school, around 7 or 8, you probably have had 2 or 3 years of schooling in English, or have learned English for 2 or 3 years, and that seems to be not enough for most people to continue to use English in life. Okay, so that's this population. The next group, which is basically studied till primary school or less, we call them as the barely literate group. They really dropped out after 4 or 3 or 2 years of education in school, and then now they're adults. And then, of course, the last group is the illiterate adults. So those are the 3 groups that we concentrate in. So this is one picture that I wanted to put in front of you. Okay, one of the 2 pictures that I wanted to put in front of you. The other picture that I want to put in front of you is the work of work done by my PhD student Devanuj. So he actually proposed a model of technology adoption by emergent users. So these users, all these users we are calling as emergent users because they are new users of technology. They are just starting to use their technologies now. Okay, we're calling them emergent users. And how do they adopt these technologies? That is the second question that naturally emerges, and therefore we are calling this as a technology adoption model by emergent. And this is actually a 2-dimensional model because 1-dimensional model doesn't cut it. The x-axis of this model is what we call the usage axis. Okay, so it consists of stages of use: unexposed, novice, learner, fluent user, competent performer. The last one, at least it's hidden on my other screen over here, is exposed. Okay, so that's the x-axis of this model. And what Devanuj did is that he identified that there are many barriers that prevent people to move from one stage to the other. If you are unexposed, you will remain unexposed as long as you don't get exposed. So lack of exposure is the first barrier. If you are exposed, but if you find technology to be very complex, that's the second barrier, complexity. If you somehow rote learn to use a product, but if you don't use it frequently, you stay a rote learned person. You never really become fluent with it. Okay, so the low frequency keeps you a rote learner. If you get opportunity to use a technological product frequently, then you become fluent. But for you to become competent, you need to develop a conceptual model of how this product works. You need to develop a conceptual understanding about how this product works. And then only you can be called a competent performer. So this is based on a lot of literature, which I'm not going to talk about now. And this is kind of a traditional model that has been, well, this is similar to the traditional model that has been used in theoretical HCI earlier. Although these barriers are something that actually Devanuj identified as part of his PhD. The other thing that Devanuj identified is that these barriers don't affect all people. There are some people who get affected by these barriers more, and then some people who get affected by them less. And he figured out through some fieldwork that actually this is how these barriers look like. And then there are these groups of people, and we put them along the y-axis of this, and we gave them some names based on their characteristics. And then we created personas to represent each of these so that I can talk about them in my talks and people can easily understand them. Okay. So the group of users that we call basic users. So our persona for that basic user is Surya. He's a 50-year-old tailor who has studied till class 6 and owns a feature phone. So what can he do? He can understand and use hardware buttons on a feature phone, a phone that looks like this. If you can still see my video, he can understand and use the hardware buttons that come on this. He can receive calls and make calls from recently dialed number list, which is the same as the, if you remember your feature phone, the green button that comes over here. Uh, he can dial numbers by pressing the keys on the number pad. So that's like landline numbers. Sometimes he keeps them. So because he's educated till class 6, so he's not an illiterate person. So he keeps these phone numbers written somewhere, or they are also saved by somebody else for him. He himself cannot navigate hierarchies because he lacks the ability to abstract. He cannot use apps such as alarm, radio, or music because all of them require navigation. He's not a navigator, which is our next category. He cannot read SMS. He has never, in fact, read an SMS because that also requires navigation. He has not done any of those. He just takes calls and makes calls. That's about it. Okay. So that's Surya. So in fact, what we did was we actually did a small experiment. So for example, we showed them a picture, like maybe a picture like this, and then we gave the users in this group a call, and we asked them this prompt call. So the prompt said, if you see mangoes, press 1. If you see apples, press 2. If you see bananas, press 3. If you see grapes, press 4. Usually this task was successful. People could press 3 to identify the banana or whatever was shown to them in the picture. On the other hand, if we asked the question, if you see flowers, press 1. If you see fruits, press 2. If you see vegetables, press 3. If you see grains, press 4. And some users in this group could not do this task. They could not press 2 to say that I see fruits. And our understanding of that was that a fruit is in fact an abstraction of things like bananas and apples and mangoes, so on. So in fact, there are no fruits in this world. There are only bananas and apples and mangoes, so on. So this abstraction, in order to be able to navigate hierarchies, you need to be able to do this abstraction. And if you lack this ability to do the abstraction, then you will remain a basic user. But even as a basic user, you will be able to do a lot of things. For example, you will be able to do the green button, red button kind of actions, or dial numbers and so on that Surya does. You will be able to. So this, by the way, is our electronic voting machine. Okay, and this also was designed, incidentally, in our design school back in 1988 when I was still a student. So it is still being used, and just because it is election season in the US and probably you are following the results and the mess that is happening in the election over there, we feel quite proud of being a democracy, and we don't really run into these issues because lots of our elections are electronic, or most of our elections are electronic. Okay, emergent users can vote, they can use basic phones, they can dial, they can browse TV channels by putting the channel up and down, and they can increase or decrease the volume button, then on off switch. They rarely do other things in the remote control of a television. And they can use devices such as elevators and other button based devices. They can use electronic devices, but then they sort of lack the ability to do the navigation because they lack the ability to do abstraction. So that's our basic user, Surya. Our next group is navigators. Naveen Kumar is our example of, is our persona for navigator. He's a 45-year-old grocery shop owner, educated till class 10, owns nowadays a cheap smartphone. So he's kind of upgraded from a basic phone. He used to have a basic phone for many years, but fairly recently he's kind of upgraded to what is called as a cheap smartphone. So he can do everything that Surya does. In addition to that, he can navigate hierarchy. So he can look up contacts or missed calls, use the camera, play songs, watch movies, use media on his smartphone. He can read WhatsApp messages, but he doesn't do that frequently. Okay. What he cannot do is he cannot explore the interface. He does not really troubleshoot. If something goes wrong, he goes for a toss. He's a Tamil speaker, so he cannot type, in spite of the fact that he is literate, is educated till class 10th. He can still not type text neither in English nor in Tamil. And as a result, he cannot save contact. He delegates this task to other people. So he can look up contact, but he cannot save contact. He can write SMSs. He cannot write SMSs. He cannot search because he cannot do any of the text input tasks. So he can browse news, okay, probably in Tamil. He can browse applications such as Hotstar and use WhatsApp, browse WhatsApp, again, probably in Tamil, not in English. And he can do many other things. Okay. Our next persona is a text inputter. He's Sriram. He's a 35-year-old cement dealer. He lives in central India. He has also educated till class 10, but he's younger than Naveen Kumar. And he owns what is now known as, what is now called as considered as a mid-range smartphone. Not the high-end smartphones that you guys probably own right now, but a mid-range smartphone. So he can do everything that Naveen Kumar does. In addition to that, he can save and browse contacts. He mostly does that in English, although his mother tongue is Hindi. He can use SMS, WhatsApp, mostly reads, sometimes forwards, rarely type. And he can search. That is his biggest strength. He can search for information. But he is not a saver, which is our next category. So he cannot save or transfer files and has no notion of a digital space. And he struggles with things like bandwidth used and WhatsApp and camera app to locate images. You can do that by browsing and navigating. He's also a navigator. He can do everything that Naveen Kumar, our navigator, could do. So he could type, for example, and search for information in Google, or these days he can use voice-based search, and he can also look up entertainment, and he can also search for contacts by typing instead of browsing and scrolling. Okay, so that's Sriram. I'm going to quickly go through the other three personas, although we don't focus much on them. Our focus is on the lower part of this model. But Pratik is our example persona of a saver. The 30-year-old local politician, educated till class 12, owns what is considered an expensive smartphone. He can do all the things that Sriram can do. He can input text fluently, mostly Romanized Marathi. He can change desktop backgrounds, ringtones, protect his phone with a pattern because he wants to maintain his secrets. Remember, he's a local politician and he might have secrets. Okay. However, he's not a very socially savvy person online. He's socially savvy person in real life, but online in social media, he does not respond to emails unless you have to tell him that please send me an email or please send me this. He has no notion of digital identity. So he has a notion of a digital space, but the notion of digital identity comes from the next group of users, which is account users. And Amol, 49-year-old jeweler, a graduate by education, and owns a smartphone and a laptop, so he opens multiple devices. He is a person that can do everything that Sriram does, plus he maintains an active social media profile for his business, and he follows social etiquette. He doesn't unnecessarily spam people and so on. And he does not trust online transactions. So he's not a transactor or a Reliance lover. Okay, so our focus, as I said, is in the lower half of this model, the user research model. Okay, so this was the second picture that I wanted to communicate to you. And one aspect of our research, or one way of looking at our research, is to see how people who are right now on the lower half of this model can do things that people who can do in the upper part of the model can do. So, for example, how can we help basic users navigate or do tasks that otherwise can be done only by navigating? And I will talk about this in a minute. But so these are the two pictures. One picture is this one, and the other picture is this one. Okay, so and our work I'm going to present in juxtaposition of these two images. Okay, so let us look at how we can help users do more things with technology than they otherwise could be able to do, given their disposition such as age or education or location or education or technology exposure and things like that. So one of the things that basic users cannot do is navigate hierarchies. So one approach to interaction design or one approach to design of interactive systems is to take away the need to navigate a hierarchy. And this is actually particularly suitable for users who are illiterate. Okay, and I have several examples of that. So, for example, I could have shown you this work, which is slightly old now, from 2007, uh, which is something that Nikhil Karwal did. He's a product design student, and he actually designed a mobile phone for the illiterate user. And one of the things that he did, I'm not going to talk about his whole presentation, but one of the things that he did was he created this dial, okay, which people can. So he basically converted what is normally available as software menu option into a hardware option. So you can actually physically rotate the dial. So this is a physical tangible dial. There is an arrow over here, like very much like a traditional dial that we might have, a knob that we might have, a fan regulator, for example, that might have. So something similar to that. And then he uses that to actually navigate into groups of contact or apps such as radio or calculator or alarm and so on. So actually, you're navigating using hardware. That is the idea over here. That is one idea. I'm just showing you one idea from his many ideas that he had in this phone. I'm going to actually focus a little bit on work done by Ruchika Mittal in the year 2010. This is also slightly old work now, but it's still interesting. So Ruchika was interested in helping adult literacy groups. Okay, so I'm going to actually, I don't know if anybody in the group knows Hindi. If any of you guys know Hindi, you are not supposed to do this. This is a puzzle for everybody who doesn't know Hindi. So I'm going to actually show you some words. So, and this is very similar to Tamil or Sinhala. So they are all languages from the same group. This is a K, okay? This is a K in Hindi. And then when you put a line next to it, it becomes a Ka. This is a M. So this is Ka, Ap, M, Kam. Okay, so this is Kam, which means work in Hindi. And then instead of M, if I write a N, then I get a Kam, which means the ear. And then if I do the M and then put a line like that, and then N, so then I get Man, which means honor. And then if I flip them around and if I put the N first, in the line, Na, M, Nam, which means name. And then if I put Na in the K, I get Na. And can you guess what this is? Anybody? Blurt it out. I'm sure you have eaten it because it's a food item. So that's the hint.
Naan.
Very good. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. So what? Now that you know a little bit, so this is what she did actually, but she made it tangibly. So Ruchika's theory was, and I'm going to actually before it starts echoing, I'm going to mute off my computer. I'm using two systems. But basically, so it actually gives you audio feedback. I just wanted to show you audio feedback. Many of you probably don't understand Hindi. But what it says is Ka, the letter that is going there, then Aki Matra, which is the line that goes next to it, and then Ma. So it spells out every character as it comes. And when a meaningful word is formed, it shows you an animation. So she tried this, but this is a system that is based on fiducial markers under these tangible characters, and that didn't work very well. She went to a literacy class. So this is a literacy class that is run by an NGO near our university campus for illiterate users. And in that, it didn't work because everybody sits on the ground and studies. Okay, so there is no standing and whatever. That didn't work. So she changed her technology. She brought in OCR-based technology, and then she actually put the camera on top, and then there's some light, and then you could actually play around with it. So this worked for her, and then she actually did her studies with the help of this system. And I'm going to again unmute and hope that it is not going to create any echoes. So what she's trying to, so one of the objectives that she had was, one of the challenges that she faced rather was that adult illiterate users actually do not have much motivation to work on their own. Okay. And so if they're in the class, if you saw the class was quite small, only 7 or 8 students and one teacher. But even in a small class, it doesn't really work very well. So one of her motivations was to actually design something that people could do self-study with. Okay. So here is a user who is trying to actually learn to do some some literacy, learning some letters of her own. And after a few minutes of trying, when she moves, I mean, if you have noticed, she was actually constantly talking to my student Ruchika, who is standing here on the side or sitting here on the side. And then after some time, she actually moved. If you just saw, she moved a couple of inches ahead and started playing around with the tool on her own. So that is what Ruchika was trying to achieve. She was trying to actually engage people in some sort of a self-study mode, and this piece of technology actually enabled her to do that. Okay. So if you see, she's still talking to Ruchika. Okay. So that was her point of view. Okay. So from this modern point of view, we take away the need to navigate a hierarchy. There is no hierarchy in any of these products. So if there is any hierarchy, flatten it out, make it into hardware, like we saw in the earlier example, Nikhil's work, or make it tangible, as we saw in Ruchika's work, and that actually takes away hierarchies and interactive products don't have to have abstraction in them, don't have to demand navigation. I mean, people can do many things with it then. Okay. If you have to use navigation, what we found is that we can use audio to direct navigation. And I'm going to explain this a little bit. So what do you guys see here?
Buttons?
Buttons, right? Immediately those buttons. Okay. But in fact, these are just three red blocks of images of different things. These are pictures of they're not touch them, so they don't feel like buttons. They are just looking like they're pictures of buttons and not buttons themselves. But because of our exposure to these things, we interpret them as buttons. In fact, somebody has explored this idea quite a bit. This was explored by, I don't know if any of you guys know who this is. The name of this person is Gary Marsden, and in fact, this is a talk that he's giving. He was given a Social Impact Award in 2007, and then in response to that award, he's giving this talk, the Sky 2007 Sky Social Impact Award talk that he was giving. And he, in fact, talked about this very specific thing, that button is not a button, but a picture of a button. Okay, and for a lot of people, a button is a physical thing. Okay, and so even if you translate it, this is so Gary Marsden is no more, but he used to work at that time he worked in South Africa. So it's one of the languages spoken in South Africa. And even if you translate it, it's just not enough. Okay, because this is still the picture of a button with a translation into it. Okay, and he actually borrowed from a famous painting by Monet, which actually sort of says that a picture of a pipe is not a pipe. You can go and see this is not a pipe. If you Google this is not a pipe, you'll find the original word. Okay. So similarly, these are pictures of buttons. Okay. However, if you call a person and you said press 1 for me, or if you want to go to Gale, press 1. If you want to go to Colombo, press 2. If you want to go to Kandy, press 3. Now it is a directed dialogue. The voice is telling you to do something. Press a button to do this. Okay, to do X. And that is a different setup than just looking at these three pictures over here. So this is a piece of work that we did with a fairly large team. So this is our team. So like Professor Mandar Rane, the first person you see here, is a colleague of mine. He's a faculty member in IDC. And then all these other bright young people were working on this project as researchers during that time. And this project was done in collaboration with many other people all over India, mainly HIV clinics. So this is about supporting HIV patients to manage their regimen better. So this is a slightly older presentation, and I would not go into much details of this, although I'll share the slides with you if you are interested in looking at the details of this. And of course, a lot has been articulated in the paper. But basically, at that time, so today, of course, in times of COVID, HIV seems like a very, very small problem. It affects very slowly, and it doesn't kill people immediately. COVID seems to be killing people off within 15 days of infection, and we still don't have a nice way of treating it, and we don't have a vaccine. HIV seems like a much smaller problem, but still, the issue was that in spite of having medication, and in spite of having medication which was available for free, people, large number of people were dying every year. In 2009, for example, 170,000 people died. Okay, and worldwide also a much larger number had died. So we started by understanding the ecosystem of people. This stands for people living with HIV/AIDS. We started by understanding that. We conducted interviews with doctors, with nurses, with patients, and we sort of transcribed all of this stuff. And we came up with many findings. We have a full paper only on the findings. But these are some interesting findings. Like, although HIV patients are counseled, counseling is insufficient, repetitive, and difficult to retain. On the other hand, the patients get too much information all in one go. Not much of it is relevant. Not much of it is testworthy. Okay. The other thing that we found, the technology used, nobody reads SMS like this. Now we have seen why it happens. We have a model for that now. But SMS reminders help with pill adherence. What we did was we sent people SMS reminders, and that was enough for people to kind of take their pills. They didn't read the SMS, but when the SMS comes at a particular time, they remember to take their pills. Also, we found some cultural aspects. We found that there was a big power distance between the doctor and the patient, and there were several gender issues also. And on the one hand, the patient trusts the doctor with their life, literally, and have great respect for the doctor. At the same time, they also have fear of the doctor, and they are actually afraid of doing things that are wrong. Okay, so anyway, so to cut a long story short, we came up with a solution, and actually, this audio you can hear. Okay, so this was our Kai paper video. This resulted in a Kai video. So basically, this is another dramatization of the same idea. So people are given a post-pill time reminder saying that you should have taken a pill by now. They are given adherence feedback. If they have symptoms, they can actually look up what can they do, what should they do about the system. They get personalized health tips. The system is protected by a security system, and it is localized to the clinic. Okay, we did some evaluations, and there are some papers about it, which I will skip right now. This system has been deployed in clinical use. The main point here, though, is that because we are using audio, we could reach out to a much larger group of people. And in fact, we found out that if we could train the patient, train the person living with HIV/AIDS for about 10 to 15 minutes in the clinic, then everybody in our user group could actually, in fact, use it because it was based on audio. One other idea is, can we use audio and visuals together? And this is an idea that was actually tried out by Abhishek Srivastava, who was another of my PhD students. Okay, before the echoing starts. So, this uses audio like you would use in IVR technology and visuals simultaneously. And what we found is that if you do that, a lot more people could actually use both audio and visuals together. Okay, so I'm going to actually skip some of these things. And although I'll share the slides with you guys, and much of this has been written up, and I actually talk about one of the projects before I wind up, which is this project, which is a project that we are working on and have been working since year 2001, I think. It is text input in Indian language. Okay. So one of the issues that navigators face is they are not able to do text input, and this is really not a fundamental shortcoming. This is empirical. This is what we observe in the world, but there is nothing fundamental. They should be able to do text input. Okay? So we need better and better mechanisms to design. We need to design better mechanisms so that people will be able to do a lot more text input. Okay. This is actually particularly affecting this large middle group of people. I think They are about 20% of Indian population, Indian subcontinental population, whom you can say they have middle school level education. They are not very comfortable with English, therefore they get left behind with technology, but they cannot type in their mother tongue. Okay, so this seems to be a issue, and this is a large number of people have worked on this project. This is just a small subset of people who have done some major contributions. And in fact, there are about 100 odd people now who have worked on this project actually that I'm about to share. So this is about actually this project. So here is a beautiful mural that somebody had put up in our design school once. And next to that mural, because it was delicate, somebody put up a sign saying that please do not touch. The English sign has been nicely typeset. The Hindi sign has been handwritten. And this is a common problem that you're seeing. So I have another talk about this, but I will not get into that. We have designed many solutions on this, but one of the solutions that we designed is this keyboard called Swara Chakra, which runs on Android platform, and it is available in 12 Indian languages. And we would love to, by the way, we don't have Snihala yet, but Snihala is the same system of languages. So, and we would love to work with any volunteers. So if you are interested, please get in touch with me. I will share my slides shortly, and you are welcome to work. So this is an open source software, and it has been going through contribution through several people. And thankfully, all these languages are well interconnected, and they have fairly similar structures, and they have fairly similar mechanisms of working. And so I would love to work with you guys. Of course, this is not a commercial tool, so we don't really have uh, this is not even a startup. I mean, this is just a lab-based product that we put out, and we actually, after in these 12 languages, so uh, and we actually by now have about 6 million users. So we were very happy when we reached about 100,000 users, which is over here, and we actually distributed sweets and had a party in our lab. And then we had a bigger party when we reached a million users, and now we are not even looking at it. Every year we are getting a million downloads. So which is amazing and which is lovely. We do have, so that you guys are Tamil speakers, then that might help. But we don't still have. If any of you guys would like to collaborate, this is open source product, and you're more welcome to join us and do. It will be nice if some of you are also an Android developer, but it is not a requirement. We do also have some Android developers in our group who can help. But if you are an Android developer, that will be fantastic, because then you can actually do a lot more with it. Okay, so we've been doing a fair amount of text input work, and I'll not talk about it, but we have done many comparative studies, and we have a bunch of papers on this, which I will sort of not talk about. Including using voice to enable people to do text input. So in fact, we did that, and in fact, we have done a bunch of studies with the help of that. I'm not playing the voice to avoid deco, but I'll send you the slides again. And so, and what we found is that in fact, voice enhances the speed with which people can type significantly. So this is the baseline here shows how fast people type. There were two different, the red group and the blue group. And as soon as we gave the blue group voice, their speeds went up. And then as soon as we gave the red group voice, their speeds went up. And as soon as we took away the voice from the blue group, their speeds went down. So voice does add significantly to text input mechanism speeds, as we have found in our work. So the other method of overcoming barrier that a navigator faces in doing things that a text inputter can do or a saver can do is maybe bringing humans in the loop. And this is the last project that I'll talk about. We did this in collaboration with Swansea University in the UK. A wonderful set of people who did this. So this was about answer questions. Okay. And we were interested in comparing how people perceive answers from machines and answers by humans. And the other dimension on that is answers given instantly versus answers given with a delay. So we compared these two, machine-powered instance versus human-powered delayed. There are already some existing products out there, but our product was one difference that our product made was it was set up in a public setting. So these were tried out two different systems. The left one is a machine-powered instant system. The right one is a human-powered delayed. I will not get into details of it. But the interesting thing was that this was deployed in Dharavi, which is a slum in Mumbai, slum area in Mumbai. It is in fact the largest slum. Normally, slums are associated with poverty. And if you look at it, it might look like a poor place, but in fact, it is a very, very industrious place. It has both residential areas as well as commercial areas. And actually, people are entrepreneurial. Large number of people there are entrepreneurs, and they provide jobs to others. They develop businesses, and they actually are a very busy place. Okay. This is a 2019 paper, so last year's paper that you might be interested in. So people ask all kinds of interesting questions. Some of these were factual questions. Some of these were contextual questions. Some of these were philosophical questions, like which came first, the chicken or the egg, for example. Or some of them were requests. Some were local. Some were search terms, like people said, people said things like India capital. Or they were personal questions like, who's my meter cable? Or who will become the next prime minister? This was done at the time of India's elections last year. Or which is the best footballer in the world? Or a subjective question. Or even advice, like what should I do to impress girls? Okay. And then the most frequently asked question was what time? What we found is that human beings generally did, if you see, compare this, the human power delayed system generally gave relevant responses most of the times. The blue answers are good answers, and the yellow answers are bad answers. The green are sort of don't know, irrelevant response. Okay, and humans particularly could answer these kind of questions very nicely. So somebody asked, "Who is the Prime Minister of America?" And the answer that the machine, when it was asked this question, it failed. It just says, "I didn't know," but the human being could actually answer the question. There is no Prime Minister of America. They have a president. His name is Donald Trump. That seems to be the case so far. We don't change in future. Okay, so that's sort of bringing the human in the loop. That's the other one. So I just wanted to then summarize. So that's the picture that I wanted to put forward with some differences. Most developing countries have a picture like this in their population. Maybe you should develop one for Sri Lanka if you're interested in finding out how your country has moved and how technology has created the country in that way. I also wanted to give you this picture. This is lot localized to India, perhaps. It might vary according to country a little bit, but perhaps Sri Lanka is still close enough to Indian culture and might still be similar. And so you might be interested in it. And then here were some ideas about how we can help people do more things. How can we design products so that people who are say basic users can do tasks that a navigator could do, or design products so that navigator can do tasks that only text inputters can, and so on. Okay. So the key takeaways that I wanted you to have is that many ICT solutions, information communication technology solutions for emergent users are now realistic. In fact, the next cool opportunities are perhaps in designing for new users as existing opportunities saturate. I don't know if you get this feeling, but I often get this feeling that current opportunities are saturated. The future is ours to create, and it is almost there. We have the opportunity to find great solutions to many problems that are plaguing the majority of the people in the world. And I also wanted to communicate that emerging users are not a monolith. They are not one big blob of people. There are many, many differences in them. And the user usage model tries to describe one way to understand this complexity. Okay, and there may be other ways that you might come up with. So thank you very much. This is what you can do. Work on the problems around you. The world develops because of what you do. Work with us on the problems in developing countries. And that is my email address. And if you want these slides, if you did bit.to/emergent Sri Lanka, you should be able to get the slides. I will also paste it in the chat for you guys. And by the way, I must thank my dad who drew this picture. He's an illustrator, as you can see. So thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
That was an interesting keynote address, and thank you, Professor Joshi. Are there any questions from the audience?
I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can see people more clearly.
Are there any questions for Professor Joshi?
Hello.
Yes.
Let me actually turn my cam on. Yeah, so right, Professor Joshi.
Again,
Yes, I don't know if you remember me, but I have met you
met in
before.
St. Andrews.
St. Andrews, yeah. I worked with Parola Christensen, and I met you at the Sinhalese text entry, emerging languages text entry workshop in 2013. So I actually at that point I was interested in doing more things towards gesture input and those things but I'm actually willing to take up your offer on developing Swara Chakra for Sinhalese, because now I'm back in Sri Lanka and now I have moved from English text entry to Sinhalese text entry now. So I would actually like to take up that offer and would like to collaborate with you on that. And the question actually, so thank you for the wonderful presentation, and rather the question I have for you is like the the text entry field has kind of gone from more UI based to more prediction and sort of machine learning based. Like now everything is pretty much borderlining on that. Now, how do you think we could actually use that like an amalgamation of technologies for the development of people? Do you think it's like something we can use for emerging users, or is it something more suitable for advanced saturated users?
I would argue that we should do both. Okay, so that my argument will be that we should do multiple things. So one thing we definitely should do is we must have a basic UI with which people can do basic text input. And so Swara Chakra is only one of our designs. In fact, we have several designs of text input mechanisms for UI because the basic UI is required at all times to be able to do text input. However, now there are a lot more tools available, including speech. For example, we have done work with speech, prediction. We have done a little bit of work. We would like to do a little bit more work. If you want to collaborate on that, you are welcome, and we would love to collaborate on that also. And if you want to come up with other mechanisms or other ways by which people can do text input, or text input again means for an end, right? So people want to express themselves. So if you find other ways by which people can express themselves, other ways by which people can communicate with each other, we should actually explore. So I've done this exercise. I do this exercise in my class. When people talk about advanced technologies, I ask them, what do you mean by advanced technology? And do that here. So I'm going to. It's a very interesting exercise to take up. The short answer for that, the technologies that I know are basic. Technologies that I don't know are advanced.
Okay.
So if you look at it that way, so anything that is new and you don't know how that is working or how to make stuff using that seems very advanced. But anything that you are very familiar with seems very basic or routine or ordinary. So seems to.
Thank you, Professor Joshi. Can I ask actually one more question stemming from the presentation, if that's okay? That is now I think the user experience of for the emerging users mostly depends on their language ability. So how do you think the incorporation of code switching would work in this case? Because at least I know that Sri Lankan people and also that Indian people we never speak in one language, right? So can we cleverly use code switching to maybe get users to do more things out of their devices instead of sticking to one language?
So actually, again, so I'm not going to answer this question also directly. Let me actually, so I asked some language experts to define what is a language, and so they came up with a very interesting answer. Okay, and if you use that answer, so my mother tongue is Marathi. Okay, so I asked, what is Marathi? Okay, so they defined Marathi as the language spoken by the people in Maharashtra. Now, if you use that as your definition, then whatever they are speaking is the language.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
Right? And it has multiple influences. Of course, no language in the world is pure. Okay? So most languages have huge number of words borrowed from other languages, and so the same process. And this process has gone on for centuries. It's not, right now there is a huge influence of English in our language. Before that, in India, there was a huge influence of Farsi or Persian languages. Before that, there was a huge influence of Sanskrit. Before that, there was a huge influence of other languages, probably are now dead and gone. Okay, so these languages constantly keep evolving. And and therefore technologies need to respond to those evolutions. So we shouldn't really codify the rules in one place. And modern, I mean, AI ML systems are perfect for doing something like that, because they are actually based on learning what you are doing.
Right. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you very much for the question.
Are there any more questions?
Oh, I have one. Professor Joshi, I'm Thirin again.
Hi.
I mean, what do you think is next? What are the things that you are working on? I mean, in addition to adding new languages, what are the other stuff that you are working on?
We are actually
in terms of emerging.
Yeah. So currently we are doing, one of my PhD students, he's actually working on helping what we call as ALEs. Don't use the word emergent users in that context, because the focus there is not technology. We are talking about adults with less education, ALEs, how ALEs will support their own children in their education. How does a adult who himself, let's say somebody is educated till class 6, now if they have children who are now studying in class 8 or class 10, how do you support your children? And all of us who grew up in middle class families know that parental support for education is very, very important. But how do these parents now support their children? So that is one area that we are working on. We are doing a little bit also in financial inclusion, because most of money related issues have moved online or digital. But that means now a lot of people don't know things like, so we are dealing with security systems for emergent issues. We are working on like, how do you come up with alternative password mechanisms? Will those work better than remembering passwords and so on? We're looking at that. And we're also looking at whether we can help people, emergent users, do online banking or mobile banking, those kind of areas. But we are always looking for more opportunities. We are also doing a little bit of work in healthcare, particularly with lifestyle-related issues, because again, in the Indian subcontinent, lifestyle challenges are the hardest ones to overcome. I mean, India is considered to be the diabetes capital of the world, so it's going to be a big issue going forward. Particularly post-COVID, everybody's at home. So,
Thank you, sir. It's a nice speech.
thank you. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here today with you guys. And I would love to come to Sri Lanka, and I hope you guys are able to host one of the major HCI conferences in Sri Lanka, which will give me the opportunity. But Sri Lanka is not that far. So we actually get some ease on COVID, maybe we should actually think about doing some exchange idea.
Just a hop away. It's just a hop away, sir.
Hopefully
we'll host the interact.
Yeah.
And then you'll be here.
I would love to be there.
Professor Josh Dilrukh here. I have a question too.
Yes, sure. How are you?
So now this is not relating directly to the presentation, but these are kind of projects that you do. I mean, with the teaching that you do and parallel to these projects, how do you because I have so many lecturers and students as well in this panel. So we would like to know, how do you balance kind of doing these projects and also teaching the theoretical concepts behind that the resonating projects? How do you kind of manage balance all those things?
That gives a lot of emphasis on the research and supports a lot of research activities within the university. So I'm very happy that IIT Bombay allows us to do that. Other than that, the other thing that I try to do is I try to integrate. So my teaching influences my research and my research influences my teaching. The students that I work with are also the students who work on the projects with me, and we try to kind of bring things earlier. I mean, earlier in my career, this was the hardest thing for me. That how do I get people to kind of, you know, how do students who are really good students, but they want to work on something advanced, as Sham said. So how do I get them to kind of work on advanced stuff, but on the problems that they see around them, basically. So that is, I think, that used to be a challenge. But I think over the years, I've managed to sort of integrate those things. And, you do a little bit of work, it finds some traction, and then others get attracted to it. And then more people, I mean, that kind of brings in more people. So I think, I don't think I have a solution to this problem, but I think it takes time, I think, is what I would say. And a nice atmosphere. So I think collaborating with colleagues, building networks across universities where such things are happening, I think is very important to be able to do that.
Okay, so it's not must that every student has to collaborate with you in the projects, the classes that you teach. It's just their options, but you use practical examples as well, is it?
Yes, so yeah, correct. So and we are a design school, so most of our work is practical. I mean, even the theoretical classes eventually end into designing a particular product or a tool or evaluating a particular product. So they are very much hands-on. Most of my teaching is hands. That helps.
Yeah, thanks. So we'll be looking forward to have you in a summer school soon. We'll see.
Sure. Thank you very much again. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk, and hope to see you guys again at another time. By the way, I'm the organizer of India HCI. I asked you to remind if any of you guys are interested in attending India HCI. It's tomorrow and day after. And it's online, so you won't have to go far from there. So you can just on the register link and register, and then be here. See you guys.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for the wonderful talk and everything. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you again, Professor Joshi. There are challenges trying to conduct this conference through an online medium, and it must be difficult to deliver Keynote where you can't interact physically with the audience. So I appreciate the time and effort taken to deliver the Keynote speech. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coordinating the session for me. Thank you.
Thank you. For those who missed the goal, bye, sir. For those who missed the gold sponsor speech, we'll play the clip again. You can then take your tea break and attend the sessions 5A and 5B at 3:50. Thank you.